All right, we're going to transition now, and I would like to invite some of the folks who joined me on this to join me on stage. So since we held our last symposium 5 years ago, we have lost several pioneers in this field, and many of you in this room are indebted to them. Surely the progress that has been made so far has benefited greatly from their efforts and their commitment. We felt both inspired and compelled to honor them this morning. One died in his 60s, two in their 70s, and one at age 86. It seemed that all went before their time. So here to pay tribute to them are members of ACC&D's board and scientific advisory board who will remind you of how they were special to both them and to our field. So first we have Dr. Michelle Kutzler, who will speak of Dr. Pat Concannon.
Thank you, Joyce. Good morning, everyone. So in 2015, we lost a passionate scientist, a man who was a great contributor to the understanding of carnivore reproductive biology. Dr. Pat Concannon was a major inspiration for my work in this field, both during my residency and PhD training at Cornell University. Not only was he my mentor, but he was my dear friend. Pat's early work defining the estrus cycle in the bitch, as well as numerous other species, was then followed by studies on canine pregnancy, parturition, and lactation. His multiple findings on spontaneous and pharmacological induction of estrus, ovulation, of puberty, and also in the field of contraception and pregnancy termination in dogs can be found in textbooks and in numerous articles for not only for dogs, but in other domestic animal species. All of this information remains paramount for developing contraception in dogs. In addition to his large body of scientific work, Pat was a tireless organizer who founded and chaired the first of 7 quadrennial international symposia on canine and feline reproduction. He organized the speakers, arranged venues and caterers, even selected the dance music for our social events, along with managing the review of the symposium proceedings, which appeared as publications in the journals of biology of reproduction, reproduction of domestic animals, and theriogenology. ISFR remains an important conference for research related to non-surgical sterilization, to find an audience and inspire other young professionals in my field. You'll see in these slides some of those people that continue to follow in his footsteps. In the slide with him from the second conference, that's Dr. John Verstegen in the middle and Dr. Gary England on the side. Of course, myself several years ago on the 4th symposium, and then Dr. Bruce Murphy in the last symposium that Pat was with us on. About 20 years ago, Pat conceived and established a not-for-profit organization called IVIS, International Veterinary Information Service, which is an online publisher of books, chapters, proceedings of veterinary science that is free and open to all without distinction. This endeavor, which he devoted an enormous amount of energy, provides veterinarians worldwide access to this scientific information. Pat was a quintessential family man, married for nearly 50 years to his wife Natalie, dedicated father and grandfather. He will be greatly missed both personally and professionally.
Thank you, Michelle. About 2 years ago, John Herr died suddenly following completion of a 10K run. Known in equal parts as a brilliant scientist and an entrepreneur, John was an active inventor. He and his laboratory named more than 35 genes in the human genome as diagnostic or therapeutic targets. In addition to basic science, he did translational research to move discoveries into products, and he created several companies for that purpose. John was passionate about the need to develop new contraceptives for humans, companion animals, and wildlife. To address this need, John set out to gain a better understanding of the fertilization process so that molecules found to be critical for sperm and egg binding and fusion could be targeted by contraceptives. In particular, he was interested in identifying molecules that were uniquely expressed in sperm and eggs to limit any potential off-target effects of the contraceptive. To get at the identity of these molecules, John pioneered the use of omic technologies to map the human sperm proteome. John's group, or outcomes from this highly successful project led to the identification and characterization of many novel sperm-specific antigens that had previously not been described. John's group also carried out preclinical proof of principle studies to identify which sperm molecules showed the most potential for contraceptive targeting. With an eye towards companion animals, John's group did the laboratory studies to test some of the strongest contraceptive targets present and functional in canine sperm. ACC&D scientific advisor Scott Coonrod from Cornell, here in the lower photo, worked directly with John as a postdoc in his lab. In Scott's words, "I can say that without a doubt, John was one of the most intelligent, charismatic, and devoted individuals I've ever met. Throughout the years I spent in his lab, his devotion to contraceptive research never wavered, and this devotion was a source of inspiration to everyone around him." Importantly, John was passionate about translating his work to the real world. As an example, he worked for many years to develop a home fertility test for men. Upon developing a prototype fertility assay, he then went on to found a company to translate these findings into an actual product. This product, called Sperm Check, can now be purchased at pharmacies across the country. Another former postdoc and colleague of John's at the time of his death, Eusebio Perez, worked with John in the areas of female contraception. Their unique findings led to a focus on cancer research that John focused on in his last years. John's interest in companion animal contraception was longstanding. He attended the first annual ACC&D meeting in 2000 and spoke at several others. John also worked alongside scientists like Stephen Boyle at Virginia Tech for many years to try to translate findings from his lab into new companion animal contraceptives. The year after this photo was taken, he began a project with Michelson grant funding to look at ablating primary oocytes in the ovary, a study that, while not directly leading to a prize-worthy solution, certainly advanced the knowledge in this field. Finally, this photo was taken in 2009 when John joined us at a think tank to look at gene silencing and related approaches. You will hear a lot more about this general promising area of study at the symposium. The loss of John is a loss to our field and beyond. And Linda.
So I get the privilege of talking about Wolfgang Jöchle. Wolfgang graduated in 1952 from the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, Germany, and he received his Doctor of Vet Medicine in 1953. So he combined involvement with basic research in animal reproduction with the development of new drugs and techniques for the control of animal reproduction, especially dogs and cats, both females and males, but also he published widely on reproduction in other species and in wildlife. He held academic appointments at Munich, Berlin, and Hanover, and he worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a research scientist and an executive at Syntex in Mexico City and in Palo Alto, California. So he was involved in the very first research on using progesterones as contraceptives in people, the original pill back in the 60s, and that was invented at Syntex. And then the Syntex people said to him, "Oh, you're a veterinarian. Why don't you set up a research laboratory and farm to study the effects of these types of compounds in animals?" So he developed the first big research, pharmaceutical research on contraceptives, and it was located in Mexico. Then he left Syntex and moved to New Jersey with his wife Maria, where he developed a consulting business to develop drugs for animals. And in 1963, he developed the first contraceptive pill for pets, which was on the European market for many years. He was a diplomat of the American College of Theriogenologists, and he founded the journal Theriogenology. I actually, after he died, I inherited some of his books, and I have the first Theriogenology edition, volume 1, number 1 on my bookshelf. And he was he published widely. He published over 300 papers in professional and refereed journals, and he published a book on the control of reproductive function in domestic animals. He was a member of many learned societies around the globe, and he's been involved in directing R&D for a wide variety of animal products. He went back to Germany a couple months every year to teach. He just loved going back and interacting with students at the vet school there, and he was awarded an honorary professorship in 1987. So this is an amazing picture of Wolfgang in his birthday here. So he was the driving force behind the production of suprelorin, the regulatory approval of suprelorin. So that was he worked with PepTech in Australia. And he was the first person to get a deslorelin implant approved by the FDA. And I actually met Wolfgang at an ACC&D symposium. And he came up to me after I gave a talk, and he said, "Oh, you're a regulatory consultant, and you're a PhD in reproductive physiology. I have a consulting business. I want to retire. I want you to take over my business." It's like, wow, this is it's a beautiful, beautiful introduction to a great friendship. And one detail that doesn't show up on his CV is he and his wife Maria fed a colony of feral cats in the woods outside his house in New Jersey. And they studied those cats for more than 20 years, and they documented their population, how many kittens they had, how the population waxed and waned over decades. And he tracked their behavior and their fecundity, and he gained insights into population dynamics that really informed his research. And he would always show pictures of his feral cats when people came over to visit him. He was really an amazing guy. He was a Renaissance man. He studied history, he studied philosophy, he read widely, and he was a profoundly happy person. And so what made him happy, in addition to his devotion to his wife, was a deep and eclectic interest in understanding and experiencing the world around him. I went one time with him to the Getty Museum outside of Los Angeles, where they have all the Roman coins and vases and artifacts. And the docent was going around and explaining things, and Wolfgang knew like 3 times as much as the docent. He would be correcting the docent as, "Oh no, that was done in right before this, and this was 2,000 years ago. No, actually it was 1,900 years ago." He had an encyclopedic memory. And he really will be missed, because he was the person that we went to when we had a question about something that nobody could remember exactly what the details of that article was, and we'd go to Wolfgang and he'd say, "Oh, that was published by J. Kirkpatrick in 1986 and the Theriogenology, and on page 72. But his LH assay wasn't as validated as it was 2 years later when he had done more work on it." He knew every detail of the literature in a way that nobody else does. So often when I come across something that I have a question of, I think, "Oh, what would Wolfgang have said about this?" So in short, Wolfgang was a joy to be around, a source of deep technical information, and really a pioneer in our understanding of animal reproduction.
I'm Holly Hazard, and it is my honor to commemorate the life of Dr. J. Kirkpatrick. Push this? Yeah. Look at that. Jay was his own man. He loved the Western United States, nature, and he abhorred bureaucracy, stupidity, and cruelty. He was one of the most stubborn men I ever met. In dealing with the Bureau of Land Management for 30 years, that was the only way that we made any progress. Anyone else would have quit, and many did. The story goes that he and Dr. John Turner of Toledo University were sitting in a bar in Billings, and 2 BLM cowboys were talking about horse overpopulation. And John and Jay got the idea that they might be able to do something about that, and that was the beginning of his life's work. Look at that. He wasn't just a scientist. He spent many nights in the Western Mountains with Native American tribes. He started his career as a park ranger and was always proud of that job, and he loved our wild world. The Aztec ponies, where Jay began darting the mares with porcine zona pellucida PZP over 20 years ago, proved his model. The PZP contraceptive has been so successful there that the population has dropped below the minimum the Park Service would like without any removals. Jay and his colleagues set up the Science and Conservation Center in Billings, Montana to refine the PZP model and to expand it to other species. and not just horses. The Science and Conservation Center was created in 1998, an independent nonprofit that is the world's only facility dedicated to the development of wildlife, contraceptives, and methods of application. PCP is now used to manage urban deer herds, zoo populations, and several elephant herds in Africa, as well as several western wild horse herds, as well as, of course, the eastern herd of the Assateague ponies. And Jay was gracious in sharing his wisdom with the world, and in particular with ACC&D. He was a speaker at our third symposium in 2006 and shared not only his vast scientific knowledge, but also the political challenges that all of us might face in this field as we try to bring contraceptives for animals to the market. Jay is missed by the world because he saved literally millions of animals from the cruelty of man, and for those of us who knew him, his refreshing and complete honesty and understanding about who he was and how he carried his truth about what matters. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to share the words on this screen, which I found inspiring. In the daily weave of our lives, those who have died are still strong, guiding threads. Theirs is the golden glimmer, or perhaps the brilliant red, or the melancholy blue. Still, they are part of the whole cloth of our lives. They are the ancestors of the goers before. In the hour-to-hour rush of our daily tasks, they travel with us through something they taught us, which is now ours to do, through something they loved, which is now ours to carry out, through something we shared, which is now ours alone and yet not. They are more than remembered. They are memory itself. For what we love lives on. Their words and wisdom our guide. Their humor our relief. Their restless concern for the world our charge. Through this, we know immortality. In the spirit of honoring them and celebrating a new generation, we've decided now is a wonderful time to introduce you to 3 students that were selected as winners of the essay contest that ACC&D ran. This contest was sponsored by Dr. Amy Fisher through the Kevin L. Brown Memorial Scholarship, and we're going to tell you more about them and let her introduce you to them at tonight's banquet. But I would love to have them stand now, and I'm going to briefly point out who they are so that you can hopefully greet them at lunch, learn more about them, and congratulate them for having won an all-expenses-paid trip to the symposium. So we have, first we've got Dr. Julie Barnes from the University of Tennessee. There's Julie. Great. Dr. Valerio Mochia. Out there, thank you. Just graduated from Italy. And Liat Morgan, who's come to us from Israel, the DVM PhD student. Thank you so much. We'll learn more about them tonight.